Alrighty, so last time we talked about how, well, you know what, let's do some of the boilerplate here first. On your machine, we can run mix new supervisor and whatever you want to call the app as we're developing together. I'm going to call it plugs. We're going to create a web application that does not use Phoenix. It only uses plug. Plug is the abstraction layer between raw Cowboy dealing with its data structures and HTTP connections at a higher level. So you don't have to deal with the web server's code directly, you just use plug. A huge amount of Phoenix is mostly just pre-made plugs. Then you get into like live view or WebSockets and a few other things, but for the most part, Phoenix is all plugs all the way down. So in this case, we'll, what do I call this, plugs? So this generates this stuff here. I'm going to remove some of these comments just because they annoy me. So we're going to add plug cowboy as a dependency. Mix hex.search plug cowboy lets us see what the latest version is. In this case, it's 2.1. So I'm just going to say 2.1.0. We'll add a few more things as we go along, but mix depth get and mix compile will get us started. So some people asked earlier, what is the --sup flag? That, when you're doing mix new, that will generate an application file with a start function, an empty list of children for your supervision tree, and also slightly modify your mix exs to start that application for you so you don't have to go through and do all that boilerplate. It's not much, but it's just that little command line flag that makes your life a little bit easier. So we come up here and we see how we have an application EX, it has a start function, it has an empty list of children, and it starts our supervision tree. We're going to add, I'm going to cheat real quick and look at my thing here, my practice stuff. So this line, I'll just copy paste it over real quick. Plugs. So plug.cowboy, this is basically going to start the process that listens, in this case, on port 4001. You can configure it to whatever port you want, but I figure someone here might have 4000 already running on their machine. Just save them a few seconds of, oh, forgot to go close that. So we're not doing HTTPS in this case. It's not too hard to add it, but one less thing for us to do in this hour, right? We're going to, the module that, I'm trying to think of how to describe this. The start of our HTTP pipeline is going to be in the plugs.endpoint module. Any questions at this point? Liars. All right, so under plugs, we're going to create an endpoint.ex. I only call it endpoint because it's pretty synonymous with a Phoenix endpoint, the place where all the HTTP processing actually begins. So plugs.endpoint. Let's make sure we still compile. Oh, I didn't compile earlier. Wait, yes, I did.
What were the dependencies you added at the beginning?
Plug cowboy at 210.
Okay.
All right, so if I ex-s mix, we got the problem. Endpoint.init is undefined or private. So a plug, there are two kinds of plugs. There are function plugs and there are module plugs. We're going to start here with a module plug. So we're going to implement the plug behavior, and that will tell us what all we need to do here. Function init1 required by this behavior is not implemented. So we def init takes an argument, and for the moment we're just going to return OK. We'll deal with that in a minute. We're just trying to get this to compile right now. Oh, one other thing I want to do, because I always have this set up in every project I ever do, aliases, p aliases, do. Whenever we compile, we want that to run compile warnings as errors. Plugs. So now I compile. Because there is a warning, well, in this case, it's actually a full compile error. So that is the one-liner syntax for Elixir functions. Init takes an argument that we're ignoring, and we're just going to return OK every time. So now, for the plug behavior requires us to implement a call to function. The first argument to call is the actual HTTP connection struct. And the second, we're just going to ignore for the moment. This needs to return the connection. And now we're compiling. So now we can actually start doing stuff. So by default, the second argument to call is whatever is returned by init. So in theory, we should be getting OK. Well, we'll just ignore that for the moment. So let's start off by making a request, returning a 200 status code, and we'll just say something in the response body. So I'm not a fan of imports for the most part. Plug.con is one of those modules you use so much when doing web development that I just import it. And by default, Phoenix controllers will import it as well. If you can find the docs for it pretty quickly, plug.con. The function that we care about right now is this sendResp3 function, which takes the connection, takes a status code, and takes the response body as arguments, and returns the connection struct. Any questions at this point? Y'all are still liars. So import plug.con, and so we're going to do send resp, pass in the con, 200, we're going to make sure we compile. We do. ix-s mix. Uh-ohs. So all you who, I just had 4001 bound on the app I was doing this on earlier today practicing. So glad I could save you all a few seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use curl, HTTP localhost 4001. And we got the wavy hand back.
Where's the percent coming from?
That happens with curl when you don't have a new line at the end of the response, and so that represents the null terminator. Someone correct me there if I'm wrong about that null terminator part. But basically it says there's no new line at the end of this, which is not good according to Unix stuff.
That might be something virtual students I didn't get out percent set.
All right.
You've got so many customizations, maybe that's something in Z shell, is that what you're using?
It is Z shell, yes.
Okay.
I usually use an obnoxious string that just flows into automatic prompt.
I've had that before too. Oh, and the best is when it messes up your terminal because it has garbage output or something. Like suddenly everything's crazy colors, and I don't know why, but all my stuff is now in Chinese. That has actually happened to me. So in this case, we'll just quickly add a new line, recompile. In this case, we don't have any fancy hot code reloader, so we have to manually recompile, and our clients have to refresh. So now we have a new line at the end, and our terminal is happy. Well, my terminal is happy. Your terminal is already happy. All right, so hello world. Great. What should we do next? Let's take a look at what I did, because I don't remember already. All right, so we'll add a few little quality of life things. First of all, well, instead of doing all of this, we will use plug.builder. So plug.builder is a convenience thing for building plug pipelines. Let's say at some particular point in your pipeline, you say, let's say you have an authorization plug which checks, are you allowed to do this? If that fails, we want it to return a 401, 403, and stop the pipeline. We don't want it to continue. Plug.builder handles the logic for checking each time, has this been halted already? So we don't have to worry about that. So what we'll do, we'll say plug, and we'll use plug.logger. Plug.logger is built into plug. Where are you? Right here. This is what says you called this endpoint and you sent this status code in this amount of time. Uh-ohs. We haven't handled the response at all. So we're going to add a little extra something here and say we're going to create our router. So this is built into plug as well, plug.router. Oop. Now when we did that, I recompiled and we get the error message that no routes were defined in our router. So we'll just say, whenever I get a GET request on my root level endpoint, send resp con, and I hate this magic. I really hate this magic of not knowing what variables I'm getting in here, but okay. This is why we use Phoenix. And we'll wave with our new line. And now we compile because we've implemented a route that is handling the connection. So we, oh, yep. You can. On what?
The thing that you were really mad about. The fact that con appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah, like, this isn't a function. Like, what are my arguments? Magic.
Is con the only one that you get, or are there others?
I don't know. And that terrifies me.
What is the macro output?
What does...
What is the macro output?
I don't know.
Macro's macro. Did you stick plugs.router anywhere in your application? I had my head down.
Oh, not yet. So, a plug.router module is another module plug. When we say use plug.router, it implements our init wanton function and our call to function for us. So we can add this to our pipeline in our endpoint by saying plugs.router. Was that what you were asking about there?
Yes, thank you.
So, uh-ohs. I don't know why.
Do you need a trailing slash in your curl?
It's not helping. So it's getting to the logger, we can see because of this output right here. And it's crashing because a response was neither set nor sent from the connection. Do I need to import plug.con here? I don't think so. I think it does that for you because magic. All right, I'm gonna cheat. Oh yes, okay, yep. All right, so I don't entirely understand why myself this is the case. Well, I don't understand it well enough that I would feel comfortable explaining it. So we just need to add plug match and plug dispatch. Yes, they are function plugs. So a function plug is any function, you can call it whatever you want. It takes the first argument, your connection, and it takes something else and it returns your connection. When we use plug.router, it either imports the match function and dispatch function or defines it in this module. If we want, we can go look that up real quick and see what it's actually doing. But match and dispatch are callable from in here. And they are functions defined which implement this thing, they're function plugs. Questions?
Are you sure you need dispatch in this scenario?
No, but I'm adding it.
If you,
Isn't
I think you have to have forward.
The string matching for the top, right?
It does.
Dis-
Yes. Here, let's check it out and see what happens. So it matches the route. The match one does see that we implemented a route, but dispatch is what actually calls that handler. So yes, we need it. Ta-da! Thank you.
That's pretty fast. 14.
14 microseconds. Yeah. Take that, Phoenix.
Was the router module in lieu of the module plug you started out with?
Yes. Well, sort of. We implemented the init and call functions manually ourselves before in this one, or was it an endpoint? I don't recall. It was an endpoint.
The endpoint's an application, and the endpoint is now calling or plugging router.
Correct. So if we want, we could do this and do and we need to import plug.con. And we should still get the same output.
Only 6.
But there's no URL matching, right?
That's correct.
We compile between those?
We did.
Couldn't see that.
We did, yes. Right here. You scared me for a second there. I was like, all right.
And then does the plug match and dispatch, I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on that.
Yep.
Does it have to be here, or could you have put it in the plug's endpoint?
It needs to be here. It's
Okay.
part of the plug.router stuff.
Okay.
So what we can do now, let's say we want to do JSON parsing on our body. We don't really want to try to decode the body until we've matched the route yet. So in after match, but before dispatch, we can do plug dot parsers, like so. What is that? That really copy paste coding image.
Oh,
That's how you know I'm a professional. So we'll just do that. So we use the plug.parsers plug, which is predefined in plug for us. You notice that it's using JSON. This will accept either URL encoded stuff or JSON stuff. So JSON is the latest and greatest, supposedly, JSON parsing and encoding library. So we've got to add that to our mix.exs. JSON, search JSON. And we are on version 1.1. Oh. Router, line 14. Oh. Proper grammar is important. All right. Questions? Dude, this is a room full of liars. Like, not one question yet when I'm asking. All right, so basically what we did here is we said when we get JSON input, use the JSON module to decode the body. So we can say, we'll go back to our curl command, and now we'll say, I'll do this wrong deliberately the first time here. Data, we'll say hello world no function clause matching and do match. Exactly. So
You can send data on a get, so it's allowed.
you can with the query parent. Oh wait, you can use the -d flag with the get?
Well, I don't know about curl, like, the spec says you can. I looked it up once, because it was, no one does it. The live stream does?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Well, it would be JSON encoded here and not the default I don't think that fixed it though in this case, so I'm actually slightly lost as to why that broke. The demo gods do not smile on me tonight.
Well, don't you need to change the get to
You
a
still have a post, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, crap. Wait, it actually lived? Did it live? It did not. Proj plugs. And back to our router here. And we'll say posted. Posted. But how do we know that it decoded the JSON?
Oh, we have
There's
it.
no way to
We
know.
use it.
That's interesting.
Yep, because I forgot something. This was what I actually intended to do wrong the first time. The rest was all just me being wrong.
So it's a string unencoded. Undecoded. Well, it's still encoded.
Content type application JSON.
Nice.
There we go. And you notice it's in the Elixir map format because we used the inspect function to see what is actually there. If we want, we can do il.inspect the connection itself or any field on it. We'll say, I was so happy when I was told about this.
Mm-hmm.
The label,
Mm-hmm.
the label.
So you didn't inspect about the I/O. It's a kernel?
That is correct. That is from kernel inspect.
How come we all keep typing I/O?
That's a different.
Kernel inspect does not output to standard out. All it does is get the string representation of whatever you pass in. Under the hood, IO inspect calls kernel inspect in order to figure out what string should be outputted. Then it outputs it, then it returns whatever you passed in.
I was wondering how to send something, okay.
And here's our con. It's a big ol' struct. Where is it? The owner, where is the connection itself? There should be a PID. Oh, do they hide it?
There it is.
They totally do.
No, it's
That's
there.
the owner.
Oh yeah. So
That's
what
the
are we-
owning process.
What are you looking for then?
So, you know what? I don't remember Cowboy's internals well enough right now. Like, when I did that presentation at the Elixir lunch on Cowboy, and we went through the code and saw exactly what happens at each stage. The connection itself, I wanted to say that it was a port
Oh.
socket. I don't recall how it worked. You're right, they are not ports. Hmm.
The sockets themselves are ports, but that probably has a gen server wrapping.
Probably.
As most sensible people would.
Oh, what's the matter?
It's
I'm
not
just-
the
Oh.
pieces are plugged in one.
I'm just running out of battery.
So at this point, we can add all sorts of things, pre-processing and post-processing. Let's one of my favorite things is plug.telemetry. So in order to use this, we have to add yet another dependency. The new telemetry lib, and that's 0.4. And I'm not sure what the patch level is. It'll figure it out for me. Yep. Oh, yes. So when we do plug.telemetry, where are you? There you are. We have to give an event prefix to say like which plug was publishing this event. So the telemetry library is a way to publish and subscribe to events within your beam related to telemetry measurements. So your code would say telemetry.execute, I think is the function, and say, okay, I measured the latency of this thing, or here's the count, how many of these processes there are in my pool, or anything else you want to measure. And the actual implementation hooks into this. It's very similar to GenEvent, if you're familiar with that. And I'd be kind of surprised if it didn't use it under the hood, but the Elixir people don't really like GenEvent for some reason. So we say, when we publish our events related to this, we'll say plugs request, or here we go, we'll do HTTP request. So now this should compile.
Yeah, it has a event. Hey, Mike.
Yay! All right, so now in order to hook into telemetry, we need a handler. The name of this doesn't matter. What matters is it takes HTTP request and then event, a third thing gets passed in. It takes the measurements, and it can optionally take some metadata and options. So as long as it implements, as long as it's, call it whatever you want, it has to be of arity 4. So we're just going to, in this case, we're just going to IO inspect the event name, and we're going to IO inspect the measurement. What did I lie
Says
about?
event.
Oh, thank you. Okay, and then in application EX, when we start up our application, we're going to want to beam telemetry. Telemetry is where the repo is on GitHub. And I'm just going to really this again and telemetry.attach. There we go. That's what we're looking for. And I don't even care about the OK because I know it's going to work and this is just a demo. Famous last words.
I think you forgot the property accidentally
Uncommented, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
We need to change the response handler.
You don't have to in this case. But for each of these that you do, they need to be, for each handler, you have to have a unique name for it. So we'll do HTTP request handler. And we don't want to call it log response handler. We called it what? Oh. Plugs.telemetry.handler is our module. We'll just alias that. And it's going to be handler.handleEvent4. Whatever. Questions? I hope so. Didn't crash. Unfortunately, it didn't log what we wanted it to log. Dang it. Oh, here's why. So this has to match up. HTTP request, and we'll have to have one for start, and we'll need one for stop. Those are defined.
Is that because of so using HTTP and request atoms in multiple places, do they all have to match all those places?
Yes, in these two spots they do. So when so here on the left, when plug.telemetry says, okay, a request has just started at this time, it will publish this, and it will, if we look in our handler, this here is the full name of our event. HTTP, request, and then start will be there when it starts. The atoms
So it'll
start.
be the event.
Yep. And then it'll include the measurements, which in this case will be the time when it started in native system units, which is nanoseconds, although it's rounded off to microseconds. Then at the end of the request, it will emit another event, which is how long the request took in nanoseconds, rounded off to microseconds. And the event name here will be stop. Because there are two things that we have attached, or two different events that we're handling here, we need to attach two different times, once for each different kind of event. This and this. And you know what? Let's, in our router, let's not do these the IO inspect, just so we can see more quickly whether this worked. Woo! It worked. So when we got the start, it was at that time in native system units, or in it's measured with system.monotonic time, is what they call. And so the implementation of that is undefined what it will return. So you have to use like system.convert, convert something, I forget what the function is, in order to turn it into different kinds of things. And that's handled for us in the stop because this took 7 milliseconds. 7,025,000 nanoseconds.
So start and stop seem pretty obvious, but those also seem like not magic atoms, I guess. Are those are built in somewhere into telemetry? Like, can we do something where you output the content type and custom
Sure, let's do it.
telemetry?
We'll implement our own function plug. Print stuff. Print stuff, con, ignore, and we're going to print con.header, request headers, I think is what it's called. Uh, types, where is it? T, there we go. Request headers. And we'll io.inspect that. Uh-ohs. Oh yes, we have to return the connection. And that's why we write unit tests. Unless we're doing demos. So there's our headers, accept ** from our server. Content length was 18. It was of type application JSON, and if we wanted, we could dig in. We could do like proplist.get content type, and then we get the content type out.
Sorry. So you didn't add that. I mean, you added that plug, the function plug. You didn't add it to the telemetry where.
Correct. It is not handled in the telemetry. I just did a plug right here in the pipeline. If we want so if we wanted, we could do telemetry.execute. Oh, I don't remember this.
The reason he gets to stop at the start is because a lot of libraries like Plug and Phoenix recognize that you imported, that you installed telemetry, and they'll start outputting those events, and then you can choose what you want to listen to and do what you will. He's just logging them, but ideally you put them in Elasticsearch or put them in some kind of logging service.
At work, we use Prometheus, and it gets exported to a third-party service called SignalFX from there. Or you could put it in StatsD or whatever. Kibana and
I
Elastic.
don't know if Plug will output things as fine-grained as what the content type is, but you can do whatever you want with telemetry. But
Yep.
a lot of these libraries will just out of the box ship with a lot of events for you.
Yep, the start and stop are out of the box. This one we're implementing right now.
Yeah. So okay. So they're not from the module. They're from.
Right, they're
Plug.
from Plug recognizing that you're using telemetry
Okay.
and doing it for you.
Yep. In our endpoint, we say plug.telemetry, which does the telemetry stuff. So. Questions at this point? Well, y'all aren't liars because you keep asking questions in the middle, so I won't call you liars this time. So using plug, just by defining these functions and these modules which implement these behaviors, Phoenix is all plugs all the way down. Let's jump over to a regular Phoenix app. I wouldn't call this a regular one, but it has a controller in there. Def index takes a connection and the params. And render is not technically a plug because it takes more than 2 arguments, but it does return the connection at the end to satisfy the definition of a function plug here.
So does a plug only take one argument?
2. A function plug takes 2 arguments, like index here, which takes the connection and your params in this case. So render returns the connection at the end so that can be further processed in your endpoint. If we jump to our endpoint in this Phoenix app, here we create sockets. Plug.static returns static endpoints like CSS, audio, fonts, blah, 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 blah. And then once that has been sent down the connection, halts the connection so that, and then it will stop at this point in the pipeline. It will not continue on once the CSS or JS or robots.txt has been sent down. The hot code reloading is, surprise, surprise, plugs. So you make an HTTP request, and at that point, it checks in development mode, has anything updated? And wow, that is slow if you accidentally leave it on in production and you're, not that I've ever done that. And you're doing load testing and find out why the heck is this taking only able to handle like this many per second. It should be handling like an order of magnitude more. Yeah, make sure mixenv equals prod in prod. Then there's a plug to assign a request ID to each request. There's plug.logger gets called here, and that's why you get to see this returned in 200 milliseconds when you first start that new Phoenix app. They're using plug.parsers to deal with URL encoded, multi-part, or JSON types. And this is an older app, so it's using Poison. And then just more and more stuff. Session handling is done with a plug. Your Phoenix router, under the hood, is a plug. Your controller is a plug. It's actually also a module plug, too, not just function plugs. If you understand plug, you understand Phoenix.
So what's the difference between a module plug and a function plug?
A function plug is just a function of any name that takes two arguments, the first of which is the connection, and it returns the connection at the end. A module plug is a module that must implement the init1 and call2 functions. And when we use these plug builders here with plug module name, it knows what to do because of that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm still really green.
No worries.
So what type of arguments, or what gets passed from that object on the init for a plug?
In this case, parser, this keyword list right here.
Okay, so whatever you put in as your second argument to calling the plug is your init for,
Yep.
okay.
And that becomes the, whatever you return from that, because you might parse some more.
Right, becomes your second argument for your.
Yep. And if we wanted to look in Phoenix controller, we'll go the roundabout way. Lots of nasty macros. Quote. There we are. So when you, okay, let's back up slightly. WhereGuildWeb.ex. Okay, and page controller. All right. So starting here, in this page controller, we're using WhereGuildWeb passing in the controller argument, or the Atom controller as an argument to the using. When we do using, all this does is, this is WhereGuildWeb. All this does is it says apply to my current module controller. So controller is a function that returns the AST that gets injected into your controller module. In this case, that further does use Phoenix controller. So we come to this using, we're in there, we import Phoenix, all the functions from Phoenix.controller. How am I doing on time? All right. Wanted to make sure I wasn't keeping you here too late. This has things like accepts, action name. Well, are there any in here that we actually typically use? Accepts gets used in Phoenix pipelines. Redirect, yep, render and redirect. Those get imported here in our web.ex file. Which uses Phoenix controller, which imports it. It imports plug.con. That's why in your controllers, you could, if you wanted, just do send resp. If you wanted. Then when we use then it does use Phoenix controller pipeline. And this is where some of the magic happens, the good magic. No, this is where your controller's init and call functions get defined, making your controller module a module plug. Where are we doing? Action. So the call function, when the router finally gets to your controller module, this call function does Phoenix controller pipeline. Oh, no, not there. Where was it? Oh, actually, it is there. But unquotes that body. All right, so long story short, we get to this action function, which is injected into your controller module. We're not going to worry about all that magic in between. Eventually it gets here, and by the way, this function is overridable. Not that you usually should, but I had a hacky situation a couple weeks ago where it came in handy to override this. And so what this is where it actually goes to your index or show or delete functions, your actions. Just apply to the current module, whatever the action is, passing in the connection and the params, which were decoded earlier with the plug parsers.
Curious what kind of conventions you use for like naming these controller functions that you call from the router.
I typically just follow the Rails conventions. And then if I have something that's not RESTful like that, whatever pops into my head. Sometimes those names are not good. I'm so sorry for some of the names.
There's an article somewhere that talks about overwriting action if you're always needing your user object or whatever, and passing it as the third parameter instead of digging into your con every single time you get out your current user.
Oh, that's clever. I'd never thought of that. I always just made a get user plug that I put in. I like that. That's clever.
Here's Chris McCord.
That explains it being clever. All right, and that's pretty much it for tonight. We implemented a web server that could do arbitrary stuff. From your Phoenix controllers, you can now do arbitrary plug stuff in your endpoint, in your router, and even in your controllers. You can plug stuff. So now you understand Phoenix pretty deeply.
What I thought was interesting, it's kind of a little bit on the too magical side, but they actually override plug for the function plug instead of controller to provide their own just for controllers. So you can add the when action is in.
Yes.
And so that's not standard plug, in case anyone's seen that action is in. That is very specific to Phoenix control. Hey, Mike, I didn't see you coming.
So def delete. So in this case, the stuff function will get called before index gets there, but not before delete. Hmm?
It's a custom plug.
Further questions, comments, concerns, rants? Thanks for coming.
Oh.